So George Russell is the kind of guy to say it's actually tomorrow when at a sleepover and it's past midnight.
Welcome back to Break Check. This is the third try. You guys are getting the boring intro because I just tried to make a George Russell joke like 7 times and Megan's Wi-Fi didn't allow it. And I don't want to hear myself say that out loud anymore. So welcome back to episode 21.
One.
21 of Break Check, episode 21. No race this past weekend, so we are doing our Get to Know series, and we are talking about none other than Mercedes, team, as funny as it is to say it, on the up and up. This season, obviously, as we will get into, a bit of a juggernaut in the 2010s. Megan will be talking about George Russell. I will be talking about my boy Lewis Hamilton, the greatest driver of all time. I'll get into that. This weekend we have the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard. We will, as usual, have a recap. Megan, let's do our fake catching up. How are you doing?
I am great. I am getting ready to leave at 3 a.m. tomorrow for Dallas. My sister and I are driving down there because she's moving there, which will be a fun road trip. But I will be flying back. I will be up in the air when the race is happening. So I will be doing some catch up before we record on Sunday.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Also, congrats to your sister on the move.
Yeah, very exciting.
It's really exciting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all moving. She's going to Dallas. Hannah's she's in Chicago now, and I'm off to London. So
in the heat with no air conditioning.
Yeah. Anyone that's listening in the UK, I'm sorry. We have AC here, so I don't know how you feel, but I will in a year or so.
Paul Ricard coming up this weekend. Do you want to touch on that? Is there any news you want to take us through before we get into the drivers?
I know in terms of upgrades, both Mercedes and Ferrari plan to bring huge upgrades, both for Hungary and for the race this Sunday. So I'm excited to see what it is and what difference it makes. I think Mercedes will be pretty good. I also know Magnussen, when he was talking about Haas, he believes that they'll be fighting at the top of the midfield, which I think is a bold statement coming from Haas after a really rocky year. But I would love to see it. I mean, I think they both him and Mick have had a great, past two races. So it'd be great to see them fighting a little bit more, maybe a little bit more ahead of McLaren. We'll see. Don't know if it'll happen, but it would be cool to see some more battles with them.
Another thing I wanted to say, obviously a ton of controversy around Daniel Ricciardo's seat at McLaren, his future in the sport. I just kind of wanted to say, I really have a lot of respect for how Daniel has handled this. And I really feel like McLaren has put him in a bit of an unfair spot, both publicly, probably internally. And I don't think he deserves a lot of the flack that he's gotten this year. And I know that's something we've talked about, but I just wanted to make sure I came out and expressed that. He has been seemingly working double time, just training and in the simulator lately, and he seems very committed to figuring this out. I would not be surprised if we see a good back half of the season from Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, I don't think he's given up yet. And I do think social media can become quite toxic pretty quickly when you are seeing all the comments of, you're done with the sport, you're not doing good anymore, you're washed, etc. So I'm not sure how much of that he's seeing. I'm sure it's pretty hard to avoid, like even just checking your social media, it'll pop up. So really props to him for how he's handled it. And I hope people maybe back off a little bit and just kind of give him the opportunity to show, because McLaren, yes, they don't have the best car right now and they're struggling a lot and they are very clearly prioritizing Norris. But I don't think that means nothing beneficial will come from Daniel, like that he won't, score some points or come ahead of Lando, because there are times in qualifying too where he has a faster pace. And so I don't think it's, necessarily fair to, push him so hard.
Don't know if it will happen. I would love to see it happen. After McLaren, I would like Daniel to get one more fair shot in F1. Before we move on to our get to know segment, I actually just wanted to, if any of our listeners are into racing sims and like racing video games and have like racing setups, I am actually looking to get into that. And I just wanted to shout that out here in case anyone has recommendations, because it is something that I am pretty new to. I'm familiar with and can figure out on my own, but any sort of advice, head start, that would be awesome. That would be really appreciated. Something I'm definitely looking to get into in the next year or so. Something I definitely want to hit hard during the F1 off season to kind of fill that void, scratch that itch. I'm already looking into actual karting leagues. There's an electric karting league around me right now. Next summer there's a gas karting league that I'm actually thinking
Cool.
about signing up for. So I've been getting really into it lately, and I feel like racing sim is inevitable for me. So I might as well, ask if anyone has any advice.
I so badly want to do one of those, like the racing sim or like get the game even, but having a MacBook, it's not very easy to play games on.
So I actually went to Andretti karting in Orlando recently, and I'll make a post about that on the Instagram. As I told Megan, I've had a week. But so I haven't gotten around to it, but I karted there and it was super fun. The karts were fast, the tracks were cool. But in the middle, so it's actually like a full arcade. Like it's like a full arcade. They had like VR laser tag. They had the
Oh wow.
three or four karting courses. They had a ton of stuff, but in the middle they actually had racing sims. And I
Oh
didn't get a
cool.
chance to try one just because it started pouring, so we just headed out. But it did look really, really cool.
That's
And there
so
were some
fun.
people there who were definitely very good at it, and some others who were just crashing at every possible moment. I think a lot of the people who do it think
Hmm.
it's just like a racing video game and doesn't have like actual physics,
Yeah.
behind it. But it looked really cool. It's definitely something I want to get into.
All right, so before we go into the drivers, we want to talk a little bit about the history. Mercedes, which as the brand of the Mercedes-Benz Group, they've been involved in Formula One in various ways, whether it was through manufacturing or as an owner, and that started in 1954. But that they were not a constructors team between the years of 1956 through 2009, which is like the majority of Formula One. So they were only in it for 2 years, then they weren't, and then they came back in 2009 or in 2010 technically, when Mercedes bought the Braun GP team and they rebranded it as Mercedes. So they bought, a team that was going under, etc. Ever since 2014, then when that new era of hybrid engines was introduced, they've won the Constructors Championship and have made itself one of the most successful teams in Formula One. So they have, the record for most consecutive constructors wins, which is 8, and they technically have the record for the most wins, which is 19 in 2016. It's collected over 200 wins as an engine supplier, and it's ranked second in Formula One history with 10 constructors and 13 wins under a Mercedes engine, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, weird history for them because they weren't directly a team, but
Hmm.
they have been a part of the sport and know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Definitely. Also, I would like to add that they have by far, not even remotely close, the best merch in F1.
No,
What?
I don't know. I mean,
The
honestly,
Tommy Hill figure branded
okay.
merch
Okay. That's pretty cool.
with
That's
the
pretty cool.
striped
I did
sleeves.
like the McLaren Rude product though. That was pretty nice. But
Okay.
yeah, no, okay. Okay. Well, yeah.
Let us
One
know.
of the best.
I'm
One of the
this
best.
is gonna be a clip. Let us know who has the best merch. I was looking around at some of them
Mhm.
before this episode. Williams kind of has really nice like team
I I
jerseys.
personally really like Williams and Aston Martin's merch, and I don't
Yeah.
care for either of the like I like Aston Martin's color, I think. That
You know
looks
who
really nice.
has really bad merch is Ferrari.
McLaren. Oh, Ferrari, yes. Ferrari merch looks like they haven't redesigned it since the early 2000s.
Yeah, and the women's merch for them. Who is shaped like that?
I have a vendetta against all teams right now for their women's merch because it's so unfair. Like it's so focused on like fitting a like child or like the body of like a stick, and it's like so just unrealistic. And the sizes are so weird. Like a small in men's would probably be like an extra small for like a woman. Like I don't know, it's just like the sizes are very weird and misshapen, and also they don't have all of the same products for men as they do for women. So like a lot of the women's products are like v-necks or maybe a polo, but then the guys have all the cool, you know, prints and the driver specific merch.
I think it should go without saying that for every male piece of merch or clothing
Mhm.
item, I think there should be an equal female equivalent. We do not need corset shaped polo shirts for Formula One fans.
Mhm.
I think that should just go without saying. I hope that that is something that gets turned around a little bit in the near
Yeah.
future. Before I move on from the merch, I don't think I've publicly said this on the podcast, but if Nicholas Latifi
Oh. Mhm.
scores a point the rest of this year, I will buy a Williams jersey, Nicholas Latifi
Yeah.
jersey, and come on here and I will issue a public apology.
Yeah, I think we both said if Latifi scores a point this year, we will buy a jersey, and we will for the remainder of the season shout out Latifi.
Or at least not rag on him. Although I
Yeah.
am going to take a dig in today because I'm going to talk about Abu Dhabi. So before we move on from the team history, we can go through some of the notable drivers. Like we said, obviously Lewis Hamilton,
Mhm.
recently Valtteri Bottas, semi recently Nico Rosberg, and then obviously Michael Schumacher.
Mhm.
Michael Schumacher came out of retirement
Yeah.
and raced for them for 1 or 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, I know for sure 2012, I want to say, and I feel like that was his last season.
Yeah, so Lewis actually took his seat. So I
Okay.
believe
So
it
then
was
it would have been 20.
2012.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah, so I think you said we're gonna do George Russell first, Lewis Hamilton
Mhm.
second. We still
Mhm.
good with that?
Yeah.
So I know we've joked about the difference in Megan and I's notes a couple times now, and this episode might be the most drastic difference in style of notes. I want to highlight how me and Megan type out the same things. So for Lewis Hamilton in our notes here, I have bio January 7th, 1985. That's his birthday. That's all I have. That is it. Megan's for George Russell says born on the 15th of February 1998, parentheses 24 years.
It's because it's so stupid, but like sometimes I forget what the age means, like what year the age is, you know? So
Yeah,
I need
no.
I need I need that extra reminder of what they actually are because it doesn't mean anything sometimes.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is good. All right. So
It's a good
Lewis
example.
Hamilton, or not Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, born on the 15th of February of 1998, is 24 years old. What else do you need to tell me about him, Megan?
Well, he was born and grew up in Kingsland, Norfolk, which is in the western part of England. Yes, I did have to look that up because I don't know the England map. Um, but he is the youngest of three. He has an older brother and an older sister. And when he was about 18 years old, he did move to Milton Keyes to be closer to the racing teams. But for the most part, he was in that area. So he started karting at the age of 7, similar to a lot of the other drivers. They kind of usually start with karting. But his brother was also in competitive karting, so he had a little bit of background with it. And during his karting days between 2006 and 2013, he won a series of championships. First one was in 2009 at both the MSA and the British Open. And then in 2010, he moved up into the Super One British Championship, Formula Kart Stars Championship, and then he won the Kart Masters British GP. So he won 3 in a row in that year, which is pretty impressive. Also, when you move up, just immediately to win. And then in 2011, he moved into the KF3 class and he won this SK USA Super Nationals title, which made him a CIK FI European Championship champion. Which, by the way, there's so many letters, but CIK is commissioned for karting. I did also have to look that
Oh,
up.
okay. I was gonna ask, you want to tell me what all those letters mean?
I know.
No, that's really cool. It sounds like he saw success very, very early, like a lot of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the mark of a really good F1 driver is when they're like just constantly moving up and becoming like one of the younger drivers to like win a certain thing.
Yeah. I haven't seen in any of the drivers things that we've done too so far where the driver was like losing a lot and early on.
Give me an F1 driver that sucked his whole life.
Well, I want to know like who was garbage in karting, but then like eventually moved up into something else and then just like was like a rock star in it, or just like did a lot of practice.
Nicholas Latifi.
Did he lose a lot?
I don't know if you remember the history, but he wasn't like spectacular.
Yeah. I think he was always like in the upper half, but never really he didn't have like record, championships, back to back. So
yeah, I think he was always above average, but he wasn't great. But yeah, no, that's even too good. I want an F1 driver who's bad at what he does.
We should have looked at Nikita Mazepin. I want to know his racing history.
You know what? For the next episode, I'll look up some of his racing history.
Okay, I want to know. All right, so going into his single-seater seasons, he started in 2014 in the Formula Renault 2 Alps, where he finished fourth. A lot of drivers around his age were racing in that as well. For example, other drivers that year were Nick de Vries, who won. He was recently test driving, but he's also a Formula E champion winner from last year. And then there's also Charles Leclerc, who won second. He's also a well-known Formula One driver, and Pietro Fittipaldi, who finished ninth that year, and he is Haas's reserve driver. So,
real quick,
go on.
Oh, sorry. Is Nick de Vries the best driver in the world that's not an F1?
I think so. Right now, I think
every single driver that we have, every single driver that we have done on this show, we go through their history, and every single one at one point has lost like a heartbreaking battle to Nick de Vries. Yeah. Every single one. And how is he not in Formula One?
It's so exhausting because he's like, what, 27 now, I think? He's a little bit, he's like around our age, maybe a little bit older. And I don't know how he got missed when they were going through all these other drivers. Like, how was he not like picked out early on?
He has put these world-class drivers through hell, and he's not enough fun. It's crazy. I just squeaked a little there too. God damn, keep going.
But anyways, yeah. So then going into Formula 4 in 2014, while also racing in the Renault series, he was competing there and he was with the defending champions of Landon Racing. He was in a 4-way championship battle with both his teammate and then a driver pairing from HHC Motorsport. He started from pole position in the final race and won his 5th race of the season while also claiming the championship. And he was only 3 points ahead of his teammate, whose name is Arjun Miani. First time I've heard the name. So yeah,
he's got a new character.
Yeah. A new character. Like it's like a Mario Kart. As a prize for winning, he was able to test a GP3 car with Arden Motorsport at the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi. And he also became the youngest winner that year of the McLaren Autosport BRDC Award. And he beat other finalists like Alex Albon and Ben Barnicoat, also a new character. And it was a 100K cash prize. And subtle. It's fine. A membership into the British Racing Drivers Club, and he was able to test an F1 with McLaren. So, cool. Which also I was like, oh, okay. So I mean, it makes sense because it's the McLaren award. But I like would have never thought of George and McLaren together had I not researched this. So
yeah.
But then in 2015, he was also one of the 12 drivers to be selected for the British Racing Drivers Club Superstars program, and he was the youngest recruit, which also is a kind of a recurring thing for George. He also has a couple of records of being the youngest for things. So, again, pretty early on, seeing a lot of success. And then in Formula 3, in 2015, he raced with Carlin Racing, and he took his first win in the opening round, and he finished ahead of both Charles Leclerc and Antonio Giovinazzi, who Antonio Giovinazzi used to race for Alfa Romeo. He's now in Formula E, but he had a pretty impressive background as well. And after a few more podiums, he finished sixth in the championship and came runner-up in the rookie championship. Charles Leclerc won the rookie championship, but that's because he had, placed higher too.
Yeah.
And in 2016, he then moved to High Tech GP, and with 2 more victories, he finished third in the championship. So again, pretty up there. Didn't end up winning, but was still pretty close. But in 2017, he actually moved to GP3 series, which I thought was interesting. I don't see a lot of drivers hop into GP before going into Formula 2 or Formula 1. So it was really cool to see that he was racing in that. And he did pretty well. He was with Art Racing for them in the 2017 year. And at the same time, he was joining the Mercedes Motorsport Junior Driver Program. So that's when he was, eventually going to be testing with Mercedes. But by the second race at the Red Bull Ring, he had his maiden pole position and then ultimately turned it into a victory. And he had a ton of victories that followed. He actually had a battle between his teammate Jack Atkin and Anthony Hubert, where he was seated fourth in victory of the season. So other names too that are really well known in motorsport. And pretty impressive race from him. And with 4 wins, 3 poles, and 5 podiums, he ended up winning the championship.
Attaboy George.
Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty impressive for, his first year in GP3. But in Formula 2, then in 2018, he raced with Art Racing in the F2 series and then also became the reserve driver for Mercedes for that year. So he had an impressive stint at Baku where he had to start 12th in the sprint race after not having a great start prior. But he set both the fastest lap and made his way up to the grid for victory, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Damn. Yeah, no, that's good.
And then his second victory was in Barcelona, and he was again dueling with Nick DeVries, so he's back at it. He had quite a few setbacks though that year with his engine failures throughout the season, but he managed to win his maiden F2 year after a season-long fight with Lando Norris. So him and Lando were fighting for the championship that year, and he ultimately became the winner. And at the time, he was the 5th rookie to win in the GP2 F2 category, which, some of the others include Nico Rosberg, who we mentioned, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Hulkenberg, and then Charles Leclerc had won the year prior.
I think you need to commit to your notes, Megan. I believe the correct pronunciation was that he won the title in his maiden F2 season after a season-long fight with the Lando Norris.
You're right, because I was going to say the Lando Norris, and then I totally just...
That's all right. Before we get into his F1 career, I want to say it's cool. So a lot of people were, when George was rumored to and eventually came to Mercedes, were kind of like, hey, this guy's kind of unproven. George has been through the ringer. Like, this is what I think we mean when we say that some drivers need the experience of Formula Renault, GP2, F2, F3, even F4. George was like battle tested by the time he stepped into the Mercedes, and I think that is why he is doing so well this year.
Oh, yeah. There's like a stark difference, I think, between drivers who really took their time growing in that single seater series and going through the different groups and having different competitions. I mean, even switching from GP3 and then into Formula 2, I think that, it forces him to adjust to a whole different type of car and team and etc. And I think that really shows in their performance now versus some of the drivers, especially like Yuki Tsunoda. He moved up so quick and had very little years in each group. And so I think there's just, yeah, like a stark difference between, both their maturity levels and how they handle different situations, and then also how they handle the car and how quickly they can adjust. So in 2019, he started driving for Williams. He was partnered with Robert Kubica for the season, and with the car being the slowest by quite a bit on the grid, they were really the only drivers competition. So, not much competition for him. It was really just like if he could pass his teammate, and he, pretty much almost always did. But it was similar to the Haas year last year, where it was, Mick was, always ahead of Nikita, but it was, like, so what,
Yeah.
So the closest position he had ever finished then was 11th, and that was after both Alfa Romeos faced a penalty, which moved him from 13th. Um, then there were two more opportunities for points, but he ultimately ended the season that year as the only driver without points. So similar again, it's a little similar to, again, like Nikita and Mick's position, where their car was just so slow that it wasn't much of a surprise that they got points. Kubica somehow got points during the season. But yeah, and also to be your rookie year, it always, people will maybe make judgment on it. So in 2020, his teammate changed and it became Nicholas Latifi for Williams, and he finally had a chance for points, and still bad car, but kind of less bad car. Uh,
I
that's the
think the
best way to
word
put.
for that is better, Megan.
Yeah. I don't want to get too hopeful, wasn't I? With a couple, though, of bad restarts and crashes early on in the season, he was having a pretty frustrating year. And you do see this in Drive to Survive, which I thought was a great kind of like coming of age thing for George Russell when they talked about it a little bit. But then at the Sakira Grand Prix, he stood in for Lewis Hamilton, who was sick with COVID, and he qualified second. But he had just missed. And he just missed the pole by 26 milliseconds to Valtteri Bottas. So, I mean, to have seen him like constantly in the back of the grid, not really getting the opportunity to show what he could do, and then just being thrown into the Mercedes last minute and knocking out a second place start, I thought was, I think it really shocked a lot of people and was pretty impressive and kind of foretelling to what was going to come for him. But he ended up taking a lead early on in that race, and he led for most of the race. But when he pitted with about 20 laps left, the mechanics put Bottas's front tires on Russell's car, which was a huge error, and it forced Russell to have to pit again in the next lap. And then with only 10 laps to go, he suffered a puncture, which made him pit again. So he still finished ninth in points, which also got him his first points. And he also won fastest lap, which earned him 3 points instead of just two. He was able to end in 18th that season, but yeah, I think it was just a heartbreaking race for everyone watching after he had nothing but great start.
Yeah.
So then in 2021, he was retained for another year alongside Latifi again. And again, you'll see in DTS the crash at the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix where he crashed with Bottas. First, he was blaming Bottas, and later he apologized as it was on Russell for the crash, but you see more of him and the Bottas bicker, uh, which of course is going to foretell what happened later. So but one of his best races to follow that was when he finished 12th, which it was an improvement after having gearbox issues in the race prior, and also the Williams still not having a great car. For him to have every car on the grid and still be in 12th and have 8 people behind him, it was a great achievement on his part to hold people back with, a fairly weak car. So for a lot of 2021, there was opportunity for Russell to be in Q3 or to finish in points, but with a series of crashes and penalties and retirements, it kind of prevented him from ever having a good result. But at the Belgian Grand Prix, there was a wet qualifying, and I remember watching this because this is around the time I started paying more and more attention to it. But he was meant to start second on the grid because he had ended up qualifying. And it was the first time there was a front row start for Williams since 2017. However, the race was delayed due to really wet conditions. And after only 2 laps completed under a safety car that day, he was able to maintain his second place podium and claim his first podium position because they ended up ending the race with only those 2 laps done.
Nice.
Yeah, it's one way to win it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the end of the season, he finished 15th in the standings, and he had 16 of the 23 points for the team, which, considering his teammate was Latifi, that's pretty standard. So Russell today, so he since moving to Mercedes this year, he has finished in the top 5 of every race that he has finished, which he's finished all but one. And to me, he has been the most impressive driver on the grid this year. I think it's been nothing but consistency for him, and to also come into the Mercedes after having been with a different car for the previous or different constructors for the previous 3 years now. I think, it's great accomplishment on his part. It was similar to Sainz, who last year had an incredible stint at Ferrari for his first year, and it's never easy for drivers to move.
Right.
So, yeah, nothing but impressed. No, I'm nothing but impressed by Russell this season.
I think I've said something along the lines early on when we first started the show. I have a lot of respect for George because he was on the worst team for his entire F1 career, just waiting and waiting and waiting to get his opportunity at the top team. And he finally gets to go to the top team, and it is no longer the top team. And it's just kind of like a rebuilding, retooling kind of year. And I think he has handled that really well when it would be easy to just kind of throw a fit when it should have been your turn. I think he is a great driver, a great guy, and I'm very excited for his future in F1. I did want to know if you saw this. I was going to bring it up before we went on to the Russell today and Mercedes portion. I have a lot of trouble piping in points while Megan's talking because she just pulls the emergency brake if she sees me about to start talking, and I don't like interrupting her. I don't know if you saw. I saw an excerpt out of Kevin Magnuson's book that Williams tried to replace George Russell with him before the 2021 season. And that Kevin declined and said he wouldn't want to race for a team that was replacing the clearly superior driver for Latifi's money.
That I have so much respect. I always liked Magnussen, but I have so much respect after hearing that because, first of all, it is really shady for Williams to do that. Also, knowing that it was kind of inevitable that George would probably go to Mercedes. I don't see how Mercedes would be very happy with that because they are pretty partnered. So it was kind of that's shocking that they were even considering replacing George. And I think it's kind of slapping them. They're getting the wrath of that now this year, still having Latifi, who's doing nothing but holding them back. So,
yeah, really happy that George is at Mercedes. A great person and driver to keep carrying the torch once Lewis retires. So that brings us to Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton.
Okay.
Megan just took us through George Russell, one half of the Mercedes AMG Petronas team. I will now talk about Lewis Hamilton, the most famous man in F1, one of the most famous men in the world. Full name, Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. Sir, don't forget it. He was born January 7th, 1985. It makes him 37 years old. I believe he is the second oldest driver on the grid. I think he's technically a little older than Seb.
Yeah.
Car number 44. I wanted to give a little bit of his background. It's really important to him, his heritage, and he was, and as of today remains the only black driver in Formula One history. So his father is Grenadian and his mother is white British. Lewis lived with his mother until he was 12 years old and then moved and lived with his father. He had a half brother, I believe Nicholas Hamilton, who was also a pro racer. One of the biggest things that drew me to Lewis initially is just how important his dad is to him. I think it's really cool how close they are. And Lewis takes every chance he can to highlight his father's support throughout the years. So his father bought him a go-kart for Christmas when he was 5 years old. He worked up to 4 jobs as a contractor in all of them. So he had an actual IT career and position, but it wasn't making enough to support Lewis's racing career. So he quit his singular job so that he had time to work 4 separate contracting positions. All the meanwhile still attending races, and he was actually Lewis's manager up until 2010.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Something that actually really resonated with me, when Lewis was 5 years old, to defend himself from bullying, he did karate. And that is actually that. So when I was little, I was a real small kid. And when I was like 5, 6 years old, when we first kind of moved to the suburbs, it was very different from what I was used to. I was getting bullied a lot, so I did karate as well. So that was something that like
Aw.
made my heart a little warm when I read it. I'm actually a black belt. I got it when I was 10 years old. I was low key kind of like a child prodigy at Taekwondo,
What?
and I quit to play football.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I have a black belt. I got it when I was 10, and the day after I got my black belt, I never went back.
Wow, that's
So,
crazy. Yeah,
anyways,
casual.
so yeah, just dropping in, humble bragging for me. I was about to say 12 years ago, but it's 16 years ago at this point.
I also have a black belt, but it's more for fashion than for anything else.
That's a good joke. Clipping that. So normally when I do these, or when we do these, like we just did for George, we just kind of go through year by year, talk about wins, talk about podiums. Lewis is the winningest driver in Formula One history. I cannot just, if I just started listing stuff off like I normally do, we would be here for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So the way I kind of wanted to do this was I wanted to talk a little bit about Formula Renault, for his single seater experience before F1.
Hmm.
I want to share a little story about karting, and then I will get into his F1 career. So, how do we feel about that? Is that good?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So, his single seater experience, he started in 2001. And in his second season in Formula Renault, he was already the driver champion. He had the title clinched already, so he just missed the last two races to go debut in F3.
Well,
And going back to what we briefly talked about with George, how kind of going through the trials and tribulations and experience of being an F1 driver,
mhm.
Lewis is Max and a lot of other drivers now are becoming the youngest to do this and that. Lewis was kind of the first one that was really just knocking off youngest milestones. When asked about being possibly one of the youngest F1 drivers ever, Lewis said, quote, "My goal is to not be the youngest in F1, but to be experienced and then show what I can do in F1." And I really think that a lot of drivers and up and coming drivers, a lot of kids who want to be drivers, they really could take a lot from that mindset from
Mhm.
the greatest driver of this generation. Potentially one of the missed opportunities of a lifetime. So Williams was not always bad how they were. And Williams came close to signing him when he was in F2. But BMW, their engine sponsor, would not fund him.
Wow.
And McLaren ended up retaining him.
Okay.
So he moved to GP2 in 2006. He won the title in his first try.
Nice.
And then Juan Pablo Montoya left for NASCAR, and Kimi Räikkönen left to Ferrari from the McLaren F1 team. And it left the vacancy for Lewis to grab a seat there. And that is how he went. That is how he went into F1. I'll go back to his karting real quick. It's not something that like there's a ton of different karting championships. And with Lewis Hamilton, I think the focus is his F1 career and his 7 championships. So I didn't want to touch on karting too much, but I did want to say, so he started in 1993. He saw quick success, not surprising.
Mhm.
When he was 10 years old, he approached then McLaren boss Ron Dennis for an autograph at a convention, I believe, or an award ceremony. And he said, "Hi, I'm Lewis Hamilton. I won the British Championship, and one day I want to be racing your cars."
That's so cool.
In 1998, so 5 years later,
Mhm.
Ron Dennis called Lewis and offered him a spot in the McLaren driver development program. The contract included an option for a future F1 seat, and Hamilton would then end up becoming the youngest driver to ever secure a contract that led to an F1 seat.
Wow, that's impressive.
So from the jump, Lewis Hamilton knew he was the guy. He knew what he wanted to be. And I just think it's really, really cool because it does seem like all the odds have just been stacked against him for as long as you go back in his career. And everything kind of had to fall into place perfectly, from his dad's support, his betting on himself, his confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis does not get the same leeway, the same benefit of the doubt that a lot of other drivers in F1 and in motorsport get. I know a lot of people don't like talking about it. I know a lot of people don't like admitting it. There
Mm-hmm.
is a race factor when it comes into it. And Lewis has been it's just an inherent disadvantage that
Mm-hmm.
he's been black in this sport. And the fact that he's been able to overcome that and turn it into the F1 career that we will get into, and
Mm-hmm.
also continue to promote inclusion and diversity and representation. I think it will go down as his most impressive accomplishment, even more than his championships.
I do actually want to say one thing on that. I saw it this morning on Twitter and I just pulled it up right now, but it was ESPN F1 shared it and it says Lewis Hamilton invited these three Carters to Silverstone this year in his continued push to raise the profile of young talent and to make sure the future of the sport is more diverse. And then it has three of these kids and it's like I am this, my name is this, and I'm 12 years old, and it has these three kids that are of different diversities, and it's great to see, and it's cool to see. It's one thing to say that you want to bring change, and it's another thing to do it, and I think Lewis Hamilton is one of the few drivers that actually does something to try and make a change, and it's really respectable on all ends.
Yeah. Driving aside, great human being. My favorite driver on the grid. It's like he's someone who like you I know it's kind of silly, but like I'm very proud to be a fan of. Like I don't have to worry about him saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, not acting on his words. He's a very genuine person, and I think that that has played a part in leading him to where he is now in his Formula One career. All right, so after all that intro, uh, we get to Lewis's F1 career. So Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time world driver champion. Like I said, it's too much to just go through each championship and list win by win by win by win and podium by podium. So I'll split his career up into a few sections. So we have McLaren from 2007 to 2012, and then Mercedes, but paired with Rosberg, 2013 to 2015, and then or 2016, I believe, actually, and then 2017 to 2020, which was his 4 World Driver Championships in a row. And then I do want to talk about 2021 a little bit before we go. So, he started at McLaren, like I said, with that karting story. He became the youngest driver to sign a contract that led to an F1 seat. And he made his F1 debut with them in 2007. He was paired with Fernando Alonso. Lewis podiumed in his debut race, and his rookie season, he finished runner up in the World Driver Championship to Kimi Räikkönen by 1 point.
Crazy.
We talk about rookie seasons now. Like if you score a couple points, you did good. Lewis came out of the gate and just looked like the best driver on the grid. He set the record for most consecutive podiums from his debut. So from his debut podium finish, he rattled off 9 podiums in a row.
Insane.
He had the most points in a debut season with 109. And a little bit overshadowed, Hamilton and Alonso had a ton of tension. as teammates in McLaren. They did not get along. There was a period where they were just not speaking, like they were just not on speaking terms.
Wow.
They had outbursts on the track and off the track. And this actually led to Alonso and McLaren to mutually terminate their contract.
Oh, I didn't know that's why he left McLaren.
Yes. There was even an investigation by the FIA that McLaren was trying to favor Alonso early on, and it was like affecting the results of other people's races, like their team orders. It was a whole
Oh.
thing. It was a very, very big mess. But Lewis obviously debuted strongly and signed a contract to stay with the team through 2012. The very next year, his second season in F1, he won his first championship with 5 wins and 10 podiums. And he actually won the championship in the last race of the season. And he overtook Timo Glock for 5th place at Abu Dhabi in the final corners to beat Felipe Massa by 1 point in the World Driver Championship. And he became the first British World Driver Champion since Damon Hill in 1996. Right off the bat, Lewis wins a championship. A lot of people will try and discredit him because most of his championships came in the DRS era. DRS, drag reduction system, I believe is what it stands for. Obviously introduced to promote overtaking on straightaways, make the races a little bit more exciting. And if you've seen an F1 race on the straightaways, if you're within a second of the car in front of you, your back wing, essentially a flap opens up, lets in more air, your car goes faster quite a bit. That is how most overtaking is done nowadays in F1. But I wanted to make sure I highlighted this McLaren World Driver Championship because he won it without DRS. Lewis can drive. Like, he is a race car driver. He can overtake with the best of them. He can tire manage with the best of them. He has a World Driver Championship of like the old regulations. And his rookie year, he missed the championship by 1 point. So I think the notion that Lewis wouldn't be able to drive in previous years, previous generations of F1, I think is just very false.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear he was, had an impressive rookie season prior to a lot more of the other changes too that came and to, I mean, even before he was on Mercedes, like I don't remember McLaren being, the top car at the time. I think it was fairly well, but it wasn't, the absolute best.
Right.
And it didn't have the functions that the cars have today. So I think, and obviously his even prior career in Formula 2 and GP2 and etc. I think goes to show that he's more than just, this driver that can do well in a certain type of car. He's been
Yeah.
impressive from the start.
Yeah. So his rest of his time at McLaren, he was still scoring points, podiums, all this, but never really materialized as a championship, as the McLaren car wasn't like the fastest in the world. So that takes us to 2013. He moves to Mercedes. Like we said, Mercedes was not outright a team for the longest of time before this point. And a lot of people were surprised by the move because Mercedes just didn't have much like recent success. He was paired with Nico Rosberg, who we'll talk about a little bit. I don't want to put too much focus on him. He was actually Lewis's childhood karting teammate. So this was a bit of a reunion at Mercedes. His first season in 2013, Lewis had 1 win. The team was, like we had said, it wasn't that he joined this powerhouse. Lewis and Mercedes came up together, as we see in 2014 with the start of the hybrid turbo generation era. Lewis wins his second World Driver Championship, first World Driver Championship with Mercedes. He had 11 wins to Rosberg's 5. He then again won in 2015, 10 wins and 17 podiums. And then in 2016, Nico Rosberg and him, this is kind of where their relationship hit a boiling point. They were going back and forth all season. Nico eventually won the F1 or the World Driver Championship and then promptly retired, like
Yeah.
immediately retired. This actually reminded me when I was younger, me and my dad used to play video games. And like I'm talking like 5, 6 years old. And I would normally beat him, but then my dad would beat me. And then right away he would say, I'm it. I'm retired. I'm done. No more. And I would lose my mind. And this is exactly what that reminded me of.
I thought you were gonna say it reminds you of when you got your black belt and then immediately didn't touch it again.
That too. there's a common theme here. So I think Lewis's rivals can be kind of split into Fernando Alonso, Nico Rosberg, Sebastian Vettel, and now Max Verstappen. Fernando Alonso didn't serve too much of a challenge. Not even that. They were pretty equally paired, but it wasn't as extended of a rivalry. And I believe the two have kind of made up and have a lot of respect for each other now. Nico Rosberg and Lewis do not seem to like each other still. These two have had, while they were teammates, had a lot of outbursts on and off the track, a lot of internal team issues. I actually, in 2016, in the last race of the season, Rosberg was up a little on Lewis, and Lewis was in first, and Lewis needed one car to pass Nico to win the championship. And Lewis actually completely slowed down and would not let Rosberg pass and held him up until the rest of the pack caught up and kept trying to get someone from the rest of the pack to pass him because he would have won the championship if someone passed Rosberg. And it didn't end up working out, but they were like, it's a battle that was heated. Nico Rosberg now works for Sky F1 Sports. He's an announcer. He will take any chance he can to take a dig at Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah. Kind of an old joke now.
Yeah. I don't know why we keep asking the guy questions. So Rosberg promptly retires. Valtteri Bottas, now Alfa Romeo driver, comes in to be Lewis's teammate for the next 5 years. But 2017 to 2022, Lewis wins 4 World Driver Championships in a row. 2017, he had a back and forth with Vettel. He had 11 poles that season and took the all-time pole record. He finished every single race in the points.
That's crazy.
In 2018, once again, both him and Vettel were going for the 5th World Driver Championships. Vettel kind of faced some driver and mechanical issues. And in that time that Vettel was having those problems, Lewis won 6 out of 7 races. And Lewis set the record for most points scored in a season with 408. 2019, Lewis held off a combination of Bottas, Verstappen, and the newly promoted Charles Leclerc to clinch with 2 races left, 11 wins, 17 podiums, 413 points, re-breaking last year's record for most points in a season. And then in 2020, which was the COVID shortened season, he still won 11 races in the shortened season, clinched the championship with 3 races left, and was 124 points clear of second place Valtteri Bottas, which means he was even more clear of his actual competition. Wow. So that takes us through Lewis's 7 World Driver Championships. Like I said, there's a lot there. I glossed over a bit just because, we're already running long. This is a pretty long episode. 2021, I just wanted to touch on it briefly. I do not think Max's title is an asterisk title.
No.
I think it is a legitimate World Driver Championship. I would never hold what happened against Max. Mm-hmm. That being said, I do think it was taken from Hamilton a
Yeah.
little bit. The race probably should have just finished under safety car
Hmm.
or been a red flag,
Yeah.
allowing Lewis to pit without losing his position, because the safety car was 9 laps, which is a long time.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even know why I wanted to bring it up. I think I'm still maybe a little bit hurt.
Yeah. It's like it's one of those things where I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that it's not Max's title, because at the end of the day, it's a race and things happen and it's all about strategy and timing and etc. Like all you think of all these different factors that happen in every race, and it was the same concept for this one. It just happened to also be a very close championship battle. And at the end of the day, I think Red Bull had the upper hand in terms of their strategy and opportunity. And anytime there was like a sliver of opportunity or hope, they took it and they got it and it helped them. Whether it was Perez battling Lewis to help, what's his name, Max come back up, or if it was all the times that they were able to pit first and get fresh tires. I mean, that you would see in any other race too if it was a when it comes to situations like that. I think it was just that ending where it was, they should have ended under a safety car and then they let people pass and there was confusion because they had done different rules at different races that year and no one really knew what was going on ever. So yeah,
it's tricky
yeah.
because, like you said, it's not Max's fault,
Hmm.
and he deserved the championship.
Hmm.
But if everything went how it was supposed to go and there was no mistakes, the
Yeah.
FIA wouldn't have let go of Michael Massey.
Yeah, that too.
That was essentially admitting we
Fault.
messed up.
Yeah.
You know, um, we've talked about this a ton. I won't drag it on too long. I do think Lewis wins one more championship,
Hmm.
and I think he retires. Um, I want to finish by saying this is in no way meant to disrespect Michael Schumacher, because I think we run into a lot of issues on social media where you can't say anything. You say, I like apples, but someone says, well, why do you hate oranges? That's not what
Yeah.
I'm saying. But I do want to end this episode by saying, and I think it's a little obvious from just our 20 episodes before, I think I can confidently say that I think Lewis Hamilton is the best race car driver of all time.
You can't not credit him all of his accomplishments. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um excited to see what the rest of this season looks like, what next season looks like. Obviously the years dwindling down on his career. I do hope he wins number 8 before he retires.
Fingers crossed. All right. Well, if you got this far, first of all, thank you for listening to us ramble about these drivers. Mercedes, I think we both really enjoy this team. It's one of my favorite teams to watch. And I particularly love both of the drivers. So, stay up to date with us on social media at BrakeCheck F1. We're on TikTok now. We'll be posting more TikTok soon. We're on Twitter. I'm tweeting on and off on occasion, very random things. So follow for that. And Instagram, we are just there and posting things. So stay up to date for us there. And yeah, we'll be back on Sunday or we'll be back on Monday technically
Mhm.
with a race recap from France GP.
Before we go, any predictions?
Yes. I
Oh.
think it's well, it's both Pierre and Ocon's home race. So I want to see both of them in the points. It would be great. Honestly, I think it would be really cool to see Ocon on the podium. I don't think it'll happen, but Alpine's been doing pretty well. But at least both of those two in points. I think Charles has a win. And I don't know. There's gotta be a DNF. That track is wild. I predict like 3 DNFs, and one crash.
Do we think Lewis continues his podium streak?
Yes, I think P3.
P3. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Excited to watch another race. Like Megan said, if you made it this far, we're on social media at BrakeCheck F1. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, all of it. The the t-shirt has been claimed by emailing us. We did get an email, courtesy of Megan's family.
Thank you, Mom.
So yeah, we will talk to you guys next Monday. This will be out Wednesday. I don't know why I'm saying this. If you're listening to this, that means it's out. Yeah, I'll see you guys later.